of CAPI, the Center for Asia Pacific Initiatives here at the University of Victoria. And I'll introduce to you Supriya Routh, who will be the speaker. He's a member of the faculty at the West Bengal National University of Juridical Sciences, which is one of the best law schools in India, located in Kolkata. And we also have the great good fortune of having Supriya as a PhD candidate in our PhD program here at UVic at the Faculty of Law. And his thesis deals with issues of globalization, labor law, and informal workers. As you'll soon hear, he's a wonderful scholar, but he's also very active in improving the life of informal workers. He's one of the founding members of a union of waste pickers in Kolkata, and in fact is president of that union. The purpose of the union is really to find practical means for accomplishing the social and economic rights of some of the most disadvantaged people in society. So that's what he'll be speaking to. His topic is Revolution in Post-Red Bengal, Workers Fight Back. And without any further ado, Supriya.
Thank you, Professor Weber. Thank you, Helen and Kathy, for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. After such an introduction, I was wondering, is it me that was going to talk? When Helen and Professor Weber asked me to talk about India in Cappy's Lunch and Learn, I thought I'll talk about Indian Maharajas and snake charmers. But then Professor Weber admonished me, no, you have to talk something academic. And therefore I selected my topic, Informal Workers Fight Back. But then again, he told me, you cannot be too academic because it's a lunch and learn. So I added a rhetoric, revolution in post-Red Bengal. So I better start from that rhetoric and take you through the presentation that I have in mind. I'll be talking about informal workers in India. I'll very briefly tell you what informal workers in India, what would that mean, being an informal worker. But before doing that, let me just explain the rhetoric to you, revolution in post-Red Bengal. Bengal has been ruled by a democratically elected left-front government led by the Communist Party of India Marxist for the last 34 years until May 2011. And this is a newspaper report, a Bengali newspaper report, of demolition of a slum, or a squatter settlement, if you may call it. Now, it talks about 50 slum houses have been demolished by the new government, and this is March 1st newspaper report, and I've been to this place last year. So the purpose why I wanted to show this slide to you is to address the rhetoric, why would I want to talk about the post-Red Revolution in Bengal. Now, the left-front government, which was ruling Bengal from 1977 to 2011, did not do really good in many socio-economic fronts. There may be other states in India, other provinces in India, say Kerala, who has done much better on many socio-economic fronts than the left-front government of West Bengal had done. But something that the West Bengal government did in the last 34 years is to bring the political power to the lowest stratum of the society. Now, Bengali intellectuals take pride in the fact that what Italy did for Europe, Bengal did for India. They were the Renaissance people, so they just take a lot of pride in themselves. But in the last 34 years, West Bengal government have brought power to the lowest stratum of the people, and these were the people with whom the political power lied for the last 34 years. And interestingly, when it changed, power calculations changed in May 2011, this is a few months after that, it seems like they tried to reverse the entire process. There's big demolition slums. And when I interviewed some of these slum people, they categorically told me, and I was really surprised to see their political awareness. They told me what the left-front government did for themselves and what the rightist government might do to them. And as it turns out, they might have been right. This is March 1 newspaper report. I also wanted to show you something which is very important in the context of our talk today. Just like British Columbia has their woman premier, we have our first woman premier in state of West Bengal. And this is her speech, and it's an apt speech for the discussion that we are going to have. In this speech, she's trying to woo the industry why they should invest in West Bengal. And I want you to carefully listen to a very small section of her speech. I hope that this works. Close to her? Ah, it's gone.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, the formal opening of Bengal Leads 2K12 by the Honorable.
The one. It is just what this type of things you are facing today. Our mission is that 100 days we will be able to.
Listen to her very carefully now.
In Bengal, we have the potentiality. Our cheap labor. If we can do from the 100 days, we will be able to deliver the goods. In Bengal, we have the potentiality. Our cheap labor. We have the talent. We have our cheap labor.
So in a speech of a few minutes, she uses cheap labor to attract industry a couple of times. So that's something that I wanted to put forth. That's the orientation of the new Bengal government, which is kind of a center to right, but it's very complicated, which wouldn't give me, I wouldn't be able to do justice if I go into that direction right now in this talk. Maybe Cappy will have to host another talk when I talk about the change in the political change in Bengal. But right now, let's get back to our present data. Now, I'll be talking about informal workers in India, and to build the groundwork, I just wanted to show you this slide. But before going in there, is there anyone in this room who has read The City of Joy, or who has heard or read Mother Teresa speak or write? Yes, there are a few people. Right, there are a few here. I want to add a caveat, because at the end I might reinforce what you have read in City of Joy or what you have heard from Mother Teresa. I might reinforce that. Therefore, I wanted to add a little caveat. Calcutta or Bengal is not only about the slum people and the slum dwellers, pavement dwellers. There's a little more, there's a whole lot of other things. But my orientation lies in what they have already advertised so much. Therefore, I wanted you to know that there is a bunch of other things. It's an unequal society over there. Now, India is poorer than sub-Saharan Africa. Now, this is again a one-sided picture. Recently, this month, when Ford Foundation, Forbes list, Forbes list published their billionaires report, 4% of world's billionaires are Indians. So we contribute to 4% of world's billionaires. At the same time, we contribute 800 and some million people who are multidimensionally poor, which is almost double the amount that we have in sub-Saharan Africa. What do I mean by that when I talk about multidimensional poverty? Multidimensional poverty does not mean only economic poverty. It means your health, it means you're talking about nutrition, it means how good the education system is, it means a bunch of other things. So in a multidimensional poverty index, India is the worst place in the entire world. Even the poverty is almost double the amount that is there in sub-Saharan Africa. But if we talk about only economic poverty, we are not doing good either. 70% of Indian population can spend 40 cents a day, and it's mostly the informal workers who falls in this category. They cannot spend 40 cents a day. The 70% of the population, and informal workers tentatively fall in this category, within this 70%. Now in this context, it's important to know who these informal workers are. And here again, another rhetoric, we are the 92%. But this is not a rhetoric really, it's statistically established that 92% of workers in India are engaged in informal employment. And informal employment ranges from agriculture to fisheries, waste picking, tailoring, and you name it, rickshaw pulling, hand rickshaw pulling, these are all instances of informal workers. What it means is that sometimes they do not have employer, they're self-employed, like the street vendor who's sitting there. Sometimes they have more than one employer, they have 5 or 6 employers, which means none of the employers take responsibility for these workers. So the crux of the matter is, most of these workers, 92% workers, are excluded from any legislative privilege, from any legal benefit. Now this exclusion is tentatively termed as informal workers. There are complexities within the concept as well, but let me just keep it this way, that these workers, these 92% workers, do not receive any benefit from the state, and they're excluded from legislative benefits and legislative privileges. Before I go on to talk about the trade union in Calcutta and the state of informal workers over there, it might be a good standard if we talk about the Constitution. What does the Constitution say? Now, we need to keep this at the back of our mind when we go on with our presentation. The Constitution provides for fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy. Fundamental rights are basically civil and political rights: right to association, right to free speech and expression, right to life. On the other hand, we have directive principles of state policy, which is constitution-given rights. And the Constitution directs the different provinces to incorporate these rights in lawmaking, so that based on that lawmaking, a government's performance could be judged. The bottom line is, the fundamental rights are enforceable in a court of law. If you are not allowed to speak, you can go to a court of law and they'll enforce your freedom of speech. But if you cannot have enough food, and if you go hungry, you cannot ask the court to feed you, because directives are not enforceable in the court of law. So we have these rights in the directives: right to work, livelihood, appropriate conditions, so forth, maternity benefit, workers' participation in management, and a whole bunch of other socio-economic rights. So in this context, we need to think about the informal workers. And here, I'm reminded about when I was doing a master's, my supervisor told me that India is the best country in the world if you look into documents only. So you also need to keep that at the back of your mind when we move on with the presentation. We'll talk about waste pickers, and waste pickers are one group of that 92% informal workers. They constitute a small percentage of informal workers, but their number is a whopping 1 million or more in India. Now these people are invisible because the state chose not to see them, not because they're invisible by themselves. They're everywhere, everyone knows about their existence, but they're invisible in law and policy. Now, I should talk about how this thing works, how the informal economy, how the informal workers work. You can call them scavengers, you can call them waste pickers, and one of my Canadian friends gave a very respectful name to them: waste miners. Now, we are writing, Mike, my friend, is collaborating with me to write a letter to Canadian Steelworkers Union, and we thought we'd use waste miners instead of waste pickers, which is much more respectful. And I thank him for introducing that term, waste miner. Now, these waste miner can be different, can fall under different categories. There can be itinerant buyers, people who go from door to door, buy waste themselves, recyclable solid waste by themselves, and then sell it to the middleman, or the next in the hierarchy. They also go to the different dumping sites and collect waste. They also go to the different small garbage collection sites, scattered all around the city of Calcutta, collect waste from there and go and sell it to the middleman. This is where they live, and this is one of the busiest streets in Calcutta. It's near a railway station, and on the footpath of this street, it's flooded with waste picker slums, and that's where they segregate their waste. Now, it's important to keep in your mind in this context that there are 147 wards, administrative divisions, in the city of Calcutta. Wards mean administrative divisions. And within this 147 wards, it's only in 7 wards that the Calcutta municipality is able to segregate waste and recycle waste. So for the 140 wards, it's the waste pickers who segregates and collects waste and recycles them. Now, this is where once they collected waste, when they've collected waste from different sites, I just go back to, now this site is one of the biggest dumping sites in Calcutta and in the entire country, in India. Now there are thousands of waste pickers running on in this place. When the truckloads of waste are being dumped here, these waste pickers who are interested in recyclable solid waste, they collect waste from there, brings it near to their houses to segregate the waste. They keep metals together, plastics together, and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's sometimes hazardous as well, because thermocol, I don't know what you call it here, thermocol, things that you cover your TV and other breakable materials with. Forget about that. Okay, so that, yeah, so foam. So the foam, it doesn't weigh much, so it wouldn't fetch too much of money. But there is bituminous in that foam. So what waste pickers do is they burn that foam so that the entire thing becomes smaller and weighs more. And the entire gas and everything, they inhales it day in and day out. And if somebody is interested, I have photographs where they're actually inhaling it. Women waste pickers surrounded, and they put all these foam in a drum, burn it, so that bituminous is sedimented. And that fetches them more money. It's a dangerous activity. They segregate waste over here. Interestingly, when I met the present labor minister in West Bengal, who interestingly is a revolutionary Marxist turned neoliberal proponent. Now he told me, you cannot tolerate people who procreate and cook on footpaths. They're making the city of Calcutta dirty. It's because of them why City of Joy is produced. It's because of them why Mother Teresa would talk about only poor people in Calcutta. So they are not very sympathetic towards these people who are living in the slums and in and around the city. So they want to evict all these people, and it was an election it's in the election manifesto of these people who are in power right now, that they want to turn Kolkata into London. Just go and Google this and how weird it sounds. Yeah, she promised, that's our chief minister, and she promised that I want to turn Kolkata into London, and they're right now doing beautification of the Ganges, but they cannot provide things for slum people. So it all depends on priority, and that's where the constitution directive principles say, the court cannot enforce it. It's left to the governments to enforce or not. She's a middlewoman, sorry. Now there are middlemen and middlewomen who are the bridge between the waste pickers and the recycling industry. While I'm talking about informal workers, I'm talking about waste workers. But on the other hand, when it goes through this woman to the recycling industry, it becomes a formal industry who maintains their account, where there are master rolls, where all the employees' name are there. So it's an industry that is based totally on informal workers, but informal workers do not derive any benefit from the industry as well, from the entire activity, productive activity. So now, another interesting thing at the background of this photo is she also lives in a slum. Right on the edge of the road, that's her house with the small utensils down there. So she's a small niche upper than the waste pickers, but the difference between her status and the waste picker status is not all that great. This is one of the slum where most of the people in the slum are waste pickers. You can also call it settlement that's not approved by law. Now, these are the places that they live, and their living places are important not because of their living. It's also important for their work, because when they collect waste, they bring it to their houses. And almost about 70 to 80% of waste workers are women. Therefore, they have to balance their home with their work. So I just give you a small description about how it goes. Early in the morning, a woman getting up, cooking something, her husband eats and leaves for his work. Her children eats and leave for school, and some people do not go to school. She leaves, goes and collects waste, brings it back to her house or the place where she lives. She cooks for the family in the afternoon. Then she goes back where she segregates waste. Then she again attends her family. So throughout the day, she balances her work with her family. So their settlements are extremely important, not only for their living, but also for their work. And this is the place where they live. And I take you inside their home. This is how she cooks. I just wish that I would have been a better photographer, because I know this is very hazy, but that's the stove that she uses right on the edge of the road, which is dangerous, surrounded with turbulent sheets and plastic. That's how she tends her family. And this is how people live inside those houses. When I took this photograph, when I was there, it didn't feel much. When I was going through these photographs and selecting these photographs, which one should go in the slides, I was thinking that this photograph reminds me only of one thing. It's the Auschwitz camp this photograph reminds me of. Again, maybe rhetoric, but that's the first thing that came to my mind. And that's how their children are brought up. So, in this context, we had to think what could be done. I was doing my PhD work over there, doing my field work in Calcutta. And then I was meeting, on one hand, these waste pickers. On the other hand, I was also meeting government officials and ministers. It's interesting to know that there is a law for informal workers in West Bengal. There is a law. Informal, unorganized sector workers benefit or welfare act. But waste workers are not part of that law. The law specifies 61 categories of informal workers: tailors, fishers, agriculturists, all these workers. But waste pickers are not there because the state chose not to see them. So when I went to talk to these different government officials, they told me, we can think of bringing in waste pickers within the purview of this law, but what they need to do is they need to form a union and apply to us, and then we send it over to the minister, who would consider, along with his cabinet, whether to bring them within the purview of this law or not. That was the first time when we thought that maybe we can think about bringing all these waste workers together to constitute a union. I also interviewed an ILO official in New Delhi. Interestingly, he also told me that the ILO cannot do, the International Labour Organization cannot do anything unless and until there is a union of workers. And these people do not have any union. So we thought that why not we constitute a union, and there were NGOs and other activists who were already working amongst these workers. I prepared a small document for one of the NGOs, Action Aid, funded, that talks about rag pickers. Rag pickers and waste pickers are the same thing. In India, we call them rag pickers, but waste pickers are the more familiar term internationally. Therefore, I'm using waste pickers for my talk. So I prepared a document for them, what needs to be done and what are the situational condition of these waste workers in Calcutta. So there were already NGOs and other activists who were working with these people. What we needed to do is we needed to show waste pickers how beneficial could this union for themselves be. And therefore, well, that's testimony of my presence. I was there. No, so we went to these different squatter settlements. We went to these different slums to talk to people and try and would be a politically correct term, to try and convince them why they should form a trade union. And people in West Bengal, anyone you talk to, are politically extremely aware. So something that caught their imagination is they can have their own sign. Like the left has their hammer and sickle, like the right has their flower and hand, they can have their own sign. That encouraged them a lot. I don't know about how much the benefits and talk about inclusion in the law affected them, but when they came to know that they can have their own sign, they were, well, we are up to that. Let's form a trade union. And then I talked to my university vice chancellor and got the auditorium free of cost. We contacted all the NGOs and intellectuals who are left-leaned and who are not a big fan of this government, but nonetheless their name carries a lot of weight. We tried to gather all of them together for the purpose of constituting this union. And this is the first meeting of the union. We called it Convention of Workers Engaged in the Waste Recycling Industry. We wanted to have the term industry in there because that's where we can claim that they're workers, because they're producing something. They're part of an industry. So we had to have this industry in there, and we tried to put in engaged rather than employed in there. So engaged, to keep it a little flexible. You may be employed, you may not be employed. So these were a few strategic decisions that we had taken. And this is the auditorium of the university that I'm attached to. There were about 500 to 600 waste workers on the first day of the meeting, and all of them contributed ₹1 each to become part of that union. We wanted this to be there because they would have the ownership of the union. And on the right-hand side photograph, you see the executive committee of the union. It's an amazing experience. When the proposal was thrown to the audience that we need participation from each one of the slums, each one of the settlements, and we are looking for about 20 people to be there in the executive committee, we were all amazed to see how democracy works. People were clamoring amongst themselves that somebody had 2 representatives, some slum, and the other slum did not have any representative. So they were clamoring amongst themselves as to who would represent the slum. Not who would represent the slum, that each of the slums were represented equally. So after going through an arduous process, we came up with an executive committee, and they appealed to the government of West Bengal to incorporate the state union in the government's registrar. And we had to face a lot of problems, because most of these workers are migrant workers. They come from states of Bihar, they come from state of Jharkhand, they come from Nepal, they come from Bhutan, they come from Bangladesh, because the state of West Bengal share porous borders with these states. Now what happens here, since they're migrant workers, they wouldn't have any residential proof, any identity proof that they are resident of Calcutta or area surrounding that. So therefore, the government refused to register the trade union because some of the executive members did not have any proof, document that they were living in the place where they claimed they were living. So we had to take a strategic decision. Instead of 20-member executive committee, we brought down the executive committee to 9 members who had their identity cards and residential proofs. Now this is just one of the hazards that we are still having during the process of registration of our union. Why we thought that the union would be necessary? These are the agendas that we wanted to discuss. Why is a union necessary? We wanted to integrate the waste pickers with the municipal waste, solid waste disposal mechanism, because the municipality is able to segregate and collect and recycle waste from only 7 wards of the 147 wards. For the rest 140 wards, we thought that we'd enter into a contract with the municipality that the waste pickers are given the right to door-to-door waste collection, and the municipality would help them with identity card and other things. So that's one of the agendas that we want to pursue. Legal protection, we want to bring them within the West Bengal Unorganized Sector Workers Welfare Act. And there is a new law, it's a central legislation, which is enacted by the Parliament of India, the Unorganized Sector Workers Welfare Act 2008. Now that's just been notified, and a big, huge fund has been allotted to that legislation. We are also looking forward to incorporate wage speakers within the framework of the central legislation. Legal activism. We are thinking of generating funds so as to buy these wage speakers security gear. And if you could remember the first photograph that we began the presentation with, a kid was wage speaking without any kind of boots, without any kind of gloves. Forget about gloves, they burn bituminous, they go to all these places where all these dumps without any protective gear. So one of the first things that we thought we need to do is get them security gears, to buy them gumboots, buy them gloves. And then we also thought that if we can generate money and if we can talk to the government, lobby with the government, we can have some kind of group insurance mechanism for these wage speakers. And then we also thought that we can maneuver the ILO complaint mechanism. And since I talked to ILO very closely and I was working at Geneva ILO office, I know that ILO can work on a complaint if it comes from a trade union. If the government of India has signed a convention, ILO convention, and that's not being followed, which is clearly not being followed, then a trade union can complain to ILO, look here, the government of India is not following the convention. And then the ILO can request the government of India to follow the ILO ratified convention. So that's a mechanism that we're thinking of maneuvering. These are the agendas with which we thought we'd begin the work of the union. And there was no novelty in these agendas, because these agendas had been very successfully pursued by informal workers' union in other places in India, not in Bengal or in Calcutta, but definitely in other places. It's been done by Self-Employed Women's Association in Gujarat. It's been done by KKPKP in Pune. It's been done by Chintan in Delhi. Now these are some of the mechanisms through which they try to lobby with the government, through which they try to give a better deal to the informal workers. And SEWA is especially internationally famous organization of women workers. And they have, I was talking to David the other day, they have their own academy wherein research is being produced. They have their own bank, they have their healthcare, childcare facility, legal aid, they have a housing cooperative as well, which builds low-cost housing for informal workers. So they kind of provide these comprehensive socio-economic guarantees, which are directed under the Constitution of India. Now, I have a thesis that goes in my doctoral, but I just want to share it with you, again in rhetorical terms, because everyone loves rhetoric. These private organizations are doing something that the state was supposed to do. So the constitutionally guaranteed socio-economic rights are being realized with the help of these unions and the cooperatives and the societies. That's part of the thesis that I want to develop about in one of the chapters. Well, that brings us to the hurdles. That's, I promise you, this is the last thing that we talk about right now. Now, one of the first hurdles is workers are not in an employment relationship. And I'm a labor law student. I know for sure that labor law is built on employment relationship. You have to identify an employer to give workers a benefit. But what if there are 5 employers and no one wants to take responsibility? What if there are no employers? And as it turns out, in India, 92% workers do not have an employer, or they have multiple employers, or the employer is hidden somewhere. Then it's disguised employment. So how do we overcome that? That's one of the hurdles, that's one of the challenges that the trade union needs to think about. We have to have political clout, because these people are the most marginalized people in the entire country, in the entire world, if I can say so. That marginalization has to be converted into political clout. One of the attempts that we made was we try and incorporate big shot names. We try and incorporate big shot names with the trade union so that we can claim that these people are in the union or somehow associated with the union. And then some of these big shot names told me that they can fix a meeting with the mayor, they can fix a meeting with the chief minister, where he advised that we get the government prepare a report so that the government has an ownership of the report and they're compelled to work on that report. We are also trying to spread awareness or the visibility of the union. We're trying to hold conferences and ask people to come and talk about the initiative. Recently in West Bengal National University of Juridical Science, a conference was held on homeless people in Calcutta. And one of the themes of that was the waste pickers and this union initiative. So we're trying to overcome the marginalization and build a political clout around the union. Legal entitlement is one of our problems, and that's something that we want to address through the formation of the union. Another of the challenges is sustaining the interest and initiative of the trade union members. Because, well, initially their adrenaline rush was huge because they would have their own seal. But 1 year, 2 years down the line, if they see that there is no benefit that's being derived from the union, how enthusiastic would they be to continue with the union or be associated with the union activities? So this is this is one of the big problems of the union. And to sustain interest, we thought that there needs, as an initiative, as a beginning, we need to provide some security here. And for which we need funds and more funds. But also we did not want the union to become policy implementing machinery of the big funders. So therefore we are not writing to Ford Foundation, we are not writing to other foundations that sponsors different NGOs, because we wanted the ownership of the union to be with the workers. And therefore we are doing stuff like fundraisers, writing to other unions in developed countries so that they can sponsor, they can provide some specialist knowledge. And we are trying to term it in very politically neutral terms. We are not saying that we want fun, but the underlying idea is we want fun. But we are trying to say that you provide us some specialization, you orient us, but here you also need funds to do a lot of things. And one of my friends advised that the fund should come last at the presentation, because that's what we are having an initiative today. We are having a fundraiser right outside. I personally made some samosas for the fundraiser. And I want to close this talk by inviting you to come to the fundraiser and contribute. Even a small contribution from your part would go on to buy boots and gloves for these workers. I think I've taken half an hour or more. So I guess conclude here. Thank you very much for doing this.